This is the Modern Architect radio show and podcast. The Modern Architect features one-on-one interviews with renowned and cutting-edge architects, influencers, and sustainability leaders. Our show informs and illuminates the transformation that architecture brings to our cities, communities, and lives. And now, introducing the host of The Modern Architect, Tom Dioro.
For our guest today, we're honored to welcome Anthony Massaro, architect and founder of Mars Hill Studio Incorporated. Tony specializes in commercial, residential, and church design and build. For more information, feel free to visit their website at marshillstudio.com. Again, that's marshillstudio.com. Today's episode is made possible by Swatchbox, the leading sample platform for architects and designers. Swatchbox brings thousands of product samples from the world's leading manufacturers into one platform. Browse materials for inspiration, create custom collections, then request your samples for free with automatic next day or second day shipping. Get started at swatchbox.com. Tony, welcome to the show. Thank you very much for being here. We're really honored to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Tony, we'd like to start our show off with if you have a quote or a prayer or a mantra that you either use or that really matters to you personally or professionally, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I would say my favorite author is G.K. Chesterton. He's a Christian author from early 20th century, kind of wrote both philosophy and history and a lot of Christian work. Anyway, he's got a saying, and that I try to use it with my kids here too, and try to make it a part of life. But basically, he says here, I'll read it so I don't screw it up. So it's like, an adventure is only an inconvenience rightly considered, and an inconvenience is only an adventure wrongly considered. And I think it really, it's a good way of going through lives. And there's lots of things we do or don't want to do, or meetings I'll not want to go to, or things that I think are going to be an inconvenience. And then when you really think of them, no, that's actually an adventure. You know, if you consider your inconveniences rightly, they turn out to be adventures.
Yeah, how did that become really mean so much to you, that mindset?
You know, in life, running a business and having a family and doing things, you have this vision of how great it is going to be to have an office or be an architect or whatever it is you're going to do. And then the realities of life just become present, and you have to do things you don't want to do. And I think it's really from that, stemming from taking things you don't want to do, or things you think are going to be difficult, or things you think are going to be inconvenient. And then if you just have the right perspective about them, and it's really helpful. I just imagine when I have meetings or things that I don't want to do, or city meetings I have to do, meeting with jurisdictions or planners or plan checkers, and you go in there thinking this is going to be a drag, but with the right perspective, you end up, you're with people, and things don't always turn out the way you plan.
Now, with that, can you share an example or a recent example of you putting that into practice?
Yeah, so recently I do a wide range of projects, everything from, I've done some nice church projects and schools, all the way down to the smallest of remodels. And I haven't done really a lot of remodels. That's kind of where I got started. But so recently I had a client that I hadn't done anything for in 10 years. And I've been working on been pretty busy working on some large projects. And it really was, hey, our bathroom flooded, and we need to rework our bathroom. We've got this terrible situation. And it was really, part of me felt like, I don't have time to do this, or this is going to be an annoyance. I really have bigger and better things to be involved with. And as it turned out, I said, I know this person, I know them for years. I want to honor them. They have a need, and I have a specific service I can offer, and I can solve the problem for them. So kind of grudgingly went down there, said, well, I'll do what I have to do. And it turned out being the greatest meeting, and it was a great time to get reconnected with them. And, just with a couple of couple of moves architecturally. You've been space planning long enough that you're able to really manipulate things in taking a small space, and we were able to solve their problem. So I felt like that was a real inconvenience of a project, but ended up becoming a blessing for someone, just because having done this for so many years and being able to solve a problem as simple as, modifying a bathroom or retweaking a couple of bedrooms. So it's a pretty small project, kind of the lowest of the projects you can almost get, and yet it turned out to be a great day.
That's terrific. Now, what inspired you to be an architect?
Pretty much when I can remember basically it stems back from, it was junior high, going from junior high to high school, and they brought the high school counselors and various things. And one of the presentations was on drafting. And I was initially hooked. I thought, that's what I want to try. I want to try drafting. That sounds like a lot of fun. So I started high school in 9th grade, enjoyed the drafting class, felt like I had some aptitude. And then by the time my sophomore year in high school, by the end of the school year, I had my teacher had arranged for me to work at a small architectural firm. So since I was 15, I've been working at architectural firms, and pretty much knew from then on that's what I wanted to do. I did take a few detours along the way, but I was hooked on architecture in high school.
And how is that played into your practice now? Actually, let's rephrase it. That early inspiration, it seems to be there's still a sense of newness with you and your projects. How do you keep that sense of newness and curiosity?
How about this for a bit of a detour? So I had a great start in high school doing architecture, then figured, okay, I'm going to go straight on to the university, went to University of Florida, or started the University of Florida. And I kind of, at that point, got really interested in music. And I was playing the guitar. And, fast forward a few years, I lost my interest in college and ended up moving out to LA to be in a band and have a musical career. And so kind of the way that ties in is I've always, and writing music and doing architecture are pretty much the same thing as far as I'm concerned, as far as the process and experience. Oh. And so there's always a newness in the sense of there's just the love of design. There's love of conceiving a project and then working through it, being excited about it in the beginning, and then working through the details and seeing it through. So the freshness is just from just having an idea and then seeing it get built.
Yeah, what's that like for you when you actually do have that idea and then see it be built according to you, not just your vision, but the owner's vision, and when you both step back and go, wow, remember this was on a proverbial napkin?
Yeah. I remember years ago I went to Arizona and I went to Frank Lloyd Wright's Taliesin West. And the person giving the presentation said a line that really struck me. And what she said was like, Frank Lloyd Wright, he built his ideas. And I remember thinking like, yeah, that's something else. And having an idea and having it built. And so specifically to your question, it's an amazing blessing and privilege. And, we all have ideas that we have a building or we have an idea we want to see it conceived. And obviously some come out better than others for various reasons. Boy, but when you really hit on a project and you sit back and look at it with the client, it's for me the ultimate gift and blessing that very few people have, and especially architects, because you're kind of creators. And it's almost reminiscent, you think in Genesis and God, he creates the heavens and the earth and he looks at it and says, it is good. And so, and obviously in the proper perspective, an architect looking at a project and stepping back and saying, wow, this turned out good. And again, I'm a pretty harsh critic, and I wish I could say that of all the projects and all the detailing and everything. And I think other architects would also appreciate that's not always the case. But boy, when it hits and it works out, it's just a great feeling. And more than a great feeling, it's just a privilege.
Yeah, I like how you mentioned that it's a privilege. This is The Modern Architect, KZSU Stanford 90.1 FM. We're talking today with Anthony Massaro. Tony is an architect and founder of Mars Hill Studio Incorporated. For more information, feel free to visit his website at marshillstudio.com. Again, that's marshillstudio.com. Tony, if you're at liberty to do so, can you share with us some of your recent projects?
Yeah. So obviously, as I mentioned, I've done various faith-based projects in schools and residences. I would say one of the a more successful recent project was a Mariners Christian School, which is a K through 8. And I've been involved with this school. I've known these guys, and we've done various remodels and adding skylights here and there. And finally, they felt like they really wanted to really remake the school. And it was built in '90 in a warehouse. And in fact, they built the second story classrooms within an existing mezzanine. So they had exterior walls, and there were no windows upstairs. So it's a great school. It's a good Christian school, great teachers, great program. But the facility was dismal. And the first thing they had said was, well, we've got, they did the studies, and it doesn't take a rocket science to know that having natural light is a better environment to be a student rather than just four walls. And so here they have this large 80,000 square foot shell, plus obviously it goes over 100 by the time we do the second floor, and it's dark. And so the first thing they're saying, well, how can we get classrooms? So we actually cut giant holes in 2 of them and created these atrium courtyards in the center with trees and natural light, and we surrounded classrooms around there. And so explaining the concept and really getting people on board, because they have to do fundraising, obviously, and really take the chance to let the donors and the parents know that they're trying to reshape this facility. So we were able to, we did all the 3D graphics, even built a computer model, fly through, and they were able to catch the vision. And so in addition to getting the skylights and retooling the inside, we had a little bit of room in the front setbacks, and I explained to them, I said, hey, when you build a remodel portion on the outer portion of an existing building, by definition you get a new facade. So we were able to completely reshape this from a dismal 1990s concrete tilt-up building in Southern California to what really looks like a custom facility. And so it's gone well. So we finished up, I think 2019, 2020, and it's been going great.
Your faith-based projects, what either inspired or how did you get involved in numerous projects of faith?
Yeah, well, it's a pretty undramatic story. So I've worked in firms and just went out on my own in 1999. And at the time, I was involved with our church, and I actually was on the elder board. And so the church, we rented various places and finally got large enough to get a facility. And it was as simple as, oh, hey, Tony, you're an architect. Why don't you help us with the project? And so that was for Rock Harbor Church. And we ended up, this was 2005, but that was basically the first project I did. I've kind of backed into it because they needed an architect, and I was able to help them space plan. So we did a small facade remodel, but it was mostly a really interesting interior tenant improvement. And what happened was, it's a church, pretty low budget, and we were trying to really create a high level of design on a low budget. So we modeled the project after, there's a similar project in Costa Mesa. It's called the Lab Anti-Mall. And what's interesting about the Lab Anti-Mall is it's kind of a deconstructionist, broken concrete, but they used raw materials. Raw wood, just trims with just kind of 4x4s or pressure treated lumber, just really open materials. And so I talked to the church and I said, hey, here's what we can do, because we have a limited budget and we did a lot of the interior finishes with volunteers. I said, let's use these rough materials. Let's have something that's really earthy and touchable and something that you can draw near to. But let's let's create high design. Let's create, rather than a deconstructionist, if you look at the way that the temple was created, or Solomon's temple, there's order and there's right proportion. And even if you go back and you look at the golden mean and the kind of the proper proportions, there really is something to that. And we all, whether actively or passively, know that. So I was able to create a design using high order and organization, but still these really materials, stamped metal, and large heavy timbers bolted to the wall that you're not afraid to go in and touch. So it ended up, it came out pretty good. And then from there, people visit the church, and then you get one call and then another, and it just kind of blossomed off of that.
Yeah, there are, on your website, I've seen they're quite inspirational, and I notice there's there's a lot of light that comes in through, although the designs are different and the styles are different, but I notice the common theme of them is light. Is that by design?
Well, it is interesting. Of course, obviously there's the faith-based, and you want to have a facility, and obviously God is light, etc. What's fascinating is, and a lot of church planners will tell you this, or at least in Southern California, the day of the community church in the middle of the neighborhood is no longer. There's parking issues, and nobody wants a church near their house. And other than churches that were built back 40, 50, 60 years ago, it's difficult to get a church in town. So typically what ends up happening is these churches are put in industrial zones, because you have large buildings, and we could typically take a type 3 building with heavy timber roof and transition that to an assembly occupancy fairly reasonably. So and then also with all the parking they do in the industrial area, there's nobody there on the weekends, and so it's easier to find parking. So with that said, we tend to work with a lot of warehouses, and so we're constantly struggling with, how do we get natural light in there? Or what can we do to make this an environment that doesn't feel like a dark, dingy atmosphere? And so where we can use clear stories and where we can bring skylights, we do. But as it's turning out in the church world, you look at however many, 500, 1,000 years ago, the drama of the cathedral was the stained glass and the color. And what's happening now is, and I'm not necessarily sure it's my favorite way of doing it, but this is kind of what's happening. The light and the drama is coming via technology. And so we have more and more churches that want, let's say, the back wall where the pastor, rather than you look at St. Peter's, or you look at any of these great churches, or even smaller churches, or the mission churches, behind the stage, behind the pulpit, you've got the cross and you've got the whole back wall. Now the churches want blank walls so they can do an LED wall and then do presentation, whatever, with color, etc. With technology. So it's a bit of a kind of a there's some tension there, let's just say that. But I was able to do one of the projects on my website is the chapel at Mariners, who really did want a traditional traditional chapel. And that project was specifically, the program was, hey, we want what looks like a traditional chapel, with the steeple and the tower, but fast forwarded to the 2000s. And so we did that project back in 2008. And so that was the program. How do we get something that looks like a traditional with lots of light, but kind of still feels modern? So that was a great opportunity to have something where we really got a chance to do lots of glazing. But it is interesting, again, in the church world, nowadays it's become far more technology driven. And, almost, sometimes we push back in terms of trying to give them more than just a black box where they can, just have it all done with lights and video.
Fascinating. This is The Modern Architect, KZSU Stanford 90.1 FM. We're talking today with Anthony Massaro, architect and founder of Mars Hill Studio Incorporated. Our public service announcement for today's show is for the Breakfast at the Crossings. The New Life is hosting Breakfast at the Crossings, a ministry to those experiencing homelessness. in collaboration with the Crossing Church in Costa Mesa, California. For more information, simply go to Facebook and Breakfast at the Crossing, New Life in Irvine. Again, we're here with Anthony Macero. Tony, can you share with us a link between music and architecture in your experience?
Yeah, and there's lots. I'm not the only musician architect. I'm sure there's probably the vast majority of them sitting out there. Architects know, of course, there's a link. And I've always, I'm a huge Frank Lloyd Wright fan, and he was fascinated and talked about playing Beethoven, and his buildings were symphonies, et cetera, et cetera. But it really is the process of conception and to execution. And just the idea of rhythm, pattern, scale, and I have this quote again. It's from I don't think that Frank Lloyd Wright came up with it, but basically, a symphony is an edifice of sound. And so if you really imagine an edifice of sound, so you can go into a symphony, and this or any great piece of music, and you really enter it, right? And you can kind of walk around and experience it, and it kind of it exerts an influence on you, and you're immersed in it. So think about it. You go into a great building, you go into a cathedral, or any great building that really has that sense of space and drama. And the phrase I use, it just exerts an influence on you. It makes you feel a certain way. And so think about your favorite song, whether it's melancholy or you're listen to something hard, or you're listening to something grand, a symphony. That music, the composer goes in with the specific intent to, I'm trying to exert an influence on you. I want you to feel a certain way with this piece of music. And when it's done right, it has a dramatic effect on people. And that's kind of the great thing about some of the faith-based projects. And I would say especially the Mariners Chapel, where people come in and say, yeah, I go in there, I really feel the presence of God. And I really feel like there's something about it. And that's that sense of kind of what we talked about before, of like looking back and saying, wow, this is good, or this is such a great privilege, because you have this idea of exerting an influence on someone and making them feel a certain way by being a part of that space. And then when it actually happens, it's kind of, it's pretty overwhelming. And so that's the thing with music. It's just, it's patterns, and you basically, obviously, God makes us creators, as in God creates ex nihilo out of nothing. We create out of just reshaping and reusing things that are already part of the creation. And what's interesting is for the music, so you think about the architect, he's using stone and timber and iron, and these are all items that come out of the ground, but it's just the reshaping it. It's the individual person and how they're blessed and how they're creative, and it's their information and their ideas that they kind of craft and shape those raw materials. And I always joke, it's like, well, for the musician, I've got the same 12 tones that Bach had, right? Or the same major scale that Mozart used. Anybody can have access to those, but the real question is, how do you arrange them, and how do you develop patterns, and what's your vision, and what are you trying to do with those? And so, again, to me, that's where the tie-in, it really is. It's really the same basic materials, and that an architect has his set of materials, and the musician has his set of materials, and then it's basically arranging those and taking those things and out of an idea, out of kind of nothing, out of thin air, and making it into something.
I love that, exert an influence. Is there a headset or mindset or an essence that you go into each project with that you want to accomplish, or is it in combination, obviously, with the owners?
Yeah, it's kind of, so I'm a musician, so I write original music, and so basically as I write original music, it's just my style, right? And I have a specific style. I come from a progressive hard rock background, and I know what I like, and I play my music, and it's a hobby, and I do it for fun, and so I'm not working for a client, so if you will, I have my style. But for architecture, I do have the same, if you will, a style that really is closest to my heart. And if I was just doing a building from scratch the way I wanted to do it, I have a version of that. And if you go on my website, I've done 2 of my own houses, and they're on there. And so I have projects that I would say, oh yeah, that looks like my style. But as the idea when it comes to architecture, it's like, you know what, I'm hired. It's a privilege and blessing to be hired by someone, and they want they want me, or they want the architect to help develop a building and a structure for them. So therefore, not all projects are what I would want. So my mindset is coming is, well, how can I serve the client? How can I give the client the project that they need that works for them? And so that's more of the mindset in terms of, well, how am I going to achieve, or what's the vision we're going to be here? Really, at the end of the day, I want a happy client. And the successful project is a project that meets all the city codes and accessibility and all those needs. I feel like it meets the architect needs, that I was able to do something creative and aesthetic, and then ultimately it meets the needs of the owner. That it's not the architect exerting their will on the owner. And it's amazing how many projects I've come into where it will be, you know, I asked the last architect 5 times, but he just wouldn't do that for me. And I scratch my head thinking like, well, unless there's a compelling reason why it shouldn't happen, you know, it's your project, you're the developer, it's your money, you should be able to get the project you want. And obviously, as architect, we're guiding them along and keeping them from making mistakes. And so I'm constantly aware of that. And so, for example, on the first project on my website that comes up, it's for Vanguard University, and it's a Spanish colonial building, right? So it's modeled after the Santa Barbara courthouse. And the reason we did that is that the campus, we're in Southern California, and it has a theme of Mediterranean Spanish colonial revival architecture, and that their original building was a very bad 1970s version of Spanish colonial architecture. And anyone who's spent any time in Southern California can see the wide array of authentic style from that era and really bad knockoffs. And this building was a bad knockoff. And I said, listen, this is your campus. If you want a timeless building, and you want a building that really feels like it's your front door and it makes a statement for the university, this is my recommendation. We're not going to try to remake this campus into a modern architecture. We've got UC Irvine, and there's Stanford, and those are really cool campuses with lots of really good buildings. I said, you know what? You're a small college. You have a couple of buildings that are already of the Spanish colonial. Then we go ahead and keep that theme. So the idea for that one was, how do we make the most out of this building? And so we turned that into, again, modeled it after the Santa Barbara courthouse to give them a timeless. And I give you that story to say that even though I feel like I have my own style and things that are near and dear to my heart, this particular building was what the client needed. And I use the same, going back to the music analogy, you know, there's guys that are really good blues players, right? Eric Clapton or Stevie Ray Vaughan, they play the blues. I don't play the blues. I'm not really, I enjoy listening to it moderately, but I'm not a blues player. The blues don't speak to me personally. But if someone hired me as a musician and say, play the blues, I wouldn't try to force them on my style. I would say, all right, I'll be the best blues player I can be. And so that's the analogy for the architecture. It's whatever the style. If they want a craftsman, or they want Spanish colonial, or whatever it is they want, we'll do that. It's not about me exerting my vision on them. So, but we do want to exert the influence in the sense of, well, if you ask for Spanish colonial, we're going to make this the best Spanish colonial we can possibly do. If you want a monumental kind of front door building that really sets the tone for the university, well, that's what we're going to build. So that's exerting the influence, but I feel like doing it in a proper way that serves and honors the client, not serving and honor the architect's ego.
Yeah, that building is outstanding. Well done, Tony, really.
Well, thank you.
The Vanguard building, it's absolutely gorgeous, and you hit it right on. It's so authentic, and it's really great. So that's great work for our audience. I know it's a plug, but it's a true one. What would you like to share that we haven't touched on, Tony, in your show today before we close out?
That's a good question. I would say from like what's such a blessing about being an architect is it really is a privilege to serve others. And, you know, I know it's so cliche, but you never stop learning. But it really, I do more architectural research and just viewing buildings in various means and methods. And so that, for me, it's kind of like it never gets old. And when I meet young people, I tell them that we're thinking about, you know, oh, you're an architect. Hey, I think I want to be an architect. I'm not sure. I just tell them, you could take one building arts or one architectural history course in school and you'll get bit by the bug. And if you're not bit by that bug, then it's like, well, maybe that's not what you're cut out to do. Mm-hmm. And so that, for me, it's like you just never stop learning. And there's so many amazing, talented architects. And there's so many people just kind of doing cutting edge things. And it's just, you know, and it's just a privilege to be part of that community.
Well, Tony, it's been a real honor and pleasure having you as our guest today. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you for having me.
You've been listening to The Modern Architect. I'm Tom Dioro. Our guest today has been Anthony Massaro, architect and founder of Mars Hill Studio Incorporated. Tony's architecture and planning firm specializes in residential, commercial, as well as churches, and is located in Costa Mesa, California. For more information, feel free to visit marshillstudio.com. Again, marshillstudio.com. Join us again next time when we welcome another outstanding architect, engineer, influencer, or civic leader committed to positive and sustainable cities, communities, and lives. Thank you. Today's episode is made possible by Swatchbox, the leading sample platform for architects and designers. Swatchbox brings thousands of product samples from the world's leading manufacturers into one platform. Browse materials for inspiration, create custom collections, then request your samples for free with automatic next day or second day shipping. Get started at swatchbox.com.